Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show. Today, bringing you another really awesome guest involved in creating a better tomorrow on some really unique fronts. I'm really excited to get into the themes we're going to be talking about today. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Nina Siragusa, who is the lead for strategy, business, and data and digital technologies at Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany. She's also spearheading efforts on a really interesting megatrend known as bioconvergence, which they define as this multidisciplinary approach to synergize biology, engineering, data and digital sciences, ultimately to create this new era of scientific collaboration for a healthier, more sustainable future. It's also the topic of an important book that just came out that she's an editor on, entitled The Bioconvergence Revolution, Challenges and Opportunities in Research Productivity. Prior to this role, Dr. Siragusa served as Chief of Staff to Dr. Laura Matz, Chief Science and Technology Officer at Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany. And prior to that, has been driving corporate innovation as biotechnology lead of a synthetic biology innovation project, senior management responsible for creation of strategic alignment, as well as building and managing high-performing teams. She also served as associate director responsible for targeting the sourcing of innovative ideas, ultimately the goal of generating new businesses within the organization. Dr. Siragusa has a Ph.D. In biology from the University of Tübingen, Germany. She also worked as a researcher in Europe and the United States at Yale prior to joining Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany back in 2016. A lot of really interesting, cool themes to get into today. Excited about the episode. Honored to have her with us. Dr. Nina Siragusa, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you so much, Ira, for inviting me. I'm excited to be here and talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. These are, a set of exciting themes that we don't normally sort of get into today, and their convergence. So another reason why I'm really looking forward to the episode. I would love to sort of start off, we could go back to, actually 2008, but even before that, because, I know, reading about your dissertation was focused on plant microbe interactions and this really sort of unique crosstalk between pathogens that were attacking a tree and other beneficial bacteria that were attacking the pathogens. Very interesting insights, not just for sort of the environment, but for potential development of interesting biocontrol agents. I know you also did similar work during your master's on this interesting sort of dung-loving fungus that had a way of making these interesting biocides to keep other bacteria away. Talk a little bit about your background and a little bit of what got you interested, as we'll be getting into the first chapter of the book, and sort of this bridging of science and nature.
Absolutely. I'm actually really excited to talk about that. It has been quite a while, and I have to make a confession. I'm a fungal biologist, and that's really when my heart beats higher when I can talk about this, because essentially my entire scientific career is based on fungal research. As you just pointed out, I already started as a student working on fungal biology in drug research. So I've been really doing working with bioreactors, fermentation of fungi, growing them and extracting compounds to then elucidate structures, understanding what can those compounds actually do for us. So this was really basic research at the time, which also created the project for my master thesis at the time of the dung growing fungus, which was in that sense exciting, because when you see the fungus growing on the dung pellets, you don't see any other organisms. Right. So you can really then hypothesize what's going on there. So we looked at the profile of the chemicals that are produced and released by the fungus. So always this sort of biochemistry focus. And I did stay in the fungal field for the entirety before moving into industry, focusing especially in my PhD on this crosstalk between Streptomyces and Heterobasidium, which is a fungal pathogen. Which essentially we looked at different aspects, anything from volatile compounds to secreted compounds. How do the bacteria interact directly with the fungus? Because that fungus is a big problem, especially in the northern hemisphere, when it comes to, when you cut the trees and the fungus can infect the freshly cut trees and then essentially infect healthy trees through the root system. So ultimately, looking at this interplay between different organisms was really fascinating at the time. And I then carried on that research in my first postdoc in Helsinki in Finland as well.
Excellent. I love the story because it's obviously it's bioconvergent. And we'll be talking more about that, but at the same time, it's natural products, which has been the mainstay of our industry for the last century. Though we don't normally think about it as much. And then obviously, we'll be talking a little more about some of the possibilities for these interesting sort of biocontrol agents in the future. But one other area I'd love to touch on before we get into everything that's going on now at your organization was your time into the gene therapy world as well. Obviously, another high-tech area, and we don't normally think. But, gene therapy is also quite bioconvergent, right? I mean, it's obviously genetics, it's virology, it's immunology, it's ultimately learning how to use this ancient organism to do things very advanced, targeted manipulations and so forth for healthcare. Talk a little bit about your time in gene therapy and a little bit of what you learned, some of the bioconvergent learnings from that experience as well.
Yeah, so absolutely. So as we're leaving the unsung heroes of the fungal biology, move on to the gene therapy. I have to say that was a big step for me, changing gear, right, from the academic fungal biology side of things to gene therapy, which is an absolutely fascinating topic, really hot topic, especially in the healthcare side of things. I essentially joined a startup that had just been acquired by Unicure. So we were really a handful of people in Heidelberg at the time. And I have to say the biggest learning, because I was the startup for just a really limited amount of time, was to get the startup set up essentially, right? I was wearing different hats, doing anything from logistics to help set up the lab to ultimately actually run experiments and get into the science. I did realize, though, that's very, from the daily work, ultimately, it was very different from what I was sort of used to as a, let's say, fungal biologist at the time, or also synthetic biology, really, because that's where the convergence also came in my previous research before, shifting gear to the startup environment, that I then essentially looked around for opportunities in the innovation area and ultimately transitioned into an innovation space at Merck.
Excellent, excellent. And I read the definition in the first chapter of the book in the intro to the show, and I want to start at this sort of the beginning of that definition, where you talk about how bioconvergence is this multidisciplinary approach. And we don't really think about, I guess, our industry. Obviously, there's organizations out there that may have a pharma division and consumer products and vaccines and diagnostics, but it doesn't always converge. And I think what you're getting at, and I'd love you to talk more about this and how sort of Merck KGaA Darmstadt decided to focus on this as a really important piece of its forward-looking strategy, that it's about each of the different sectors informing the other. So in the case of your organization, the electronics business can teach the healthcare business a lot about digital health products. The healthcare business can teach the life science business about cell culture and the whole self-culturing meats stuff that's going on there. Talk a little bit about the background to bioconvergence at Merck KGaA Darmstadt, And I watched this video, and we'll put the link to it, entitled "The Bioconvergence Revolution Is Here." It was from a couple of years ago, and you lead a very interesting discussion with a variety of thought leaders and everything from AI-powered drug discovery to neuromorphic computing, digital twins. Talk about a couple of years ago, what was happening at the organization. Say, this is something that's going to be the future of our business.
Exactly. So to really define it very simple, and you already alluded to it, right? The bioconvergence, how we look at it on a group-wide level, is really the convergence of scientific disciplines like biology, chemistry, engineering, and so on with digitalization. So this is really, in a nutshell, to speed up and increase the impact of scientific discovery. We have 3 business units, so we can essentially leverage the capabilities across all business units, but as one company, and drive this innovation of converging the technologies forward, especially by leveraging digitalization.
Excellent. So let's dive into some of these topics, because each one is more fascinating than next, and I think a great place to start, because we did profile Dr. Ozkan and Waleed Mahana a couple months ago, talking about digital health at the organization. One of the chapters in the book is specifically focused on digital twins and biomanufacturing, and I've mentioned the bio show. This is also something that you've been focusing on per your MBA. Actually, I have spoken with Michelangelo Canzanieri in the past, not on an episode, but talking about, hey, okay, the digital twin concept. We talked a little bit on the show, but in the case of an organization that's in the pharma business, if we are building a $1 billion production facility to make such and such biologics down the road, we want to make sure that we do it properly. And this digital twinning concept is one way, or a really novel way to go about it. Clearly, there's many other applications. Obviously, the pie in the sky concept. So, hey, one day we will have a digital Dr. Nina Siragusa to test the therapies on before we take them. Actually, a lot of in silico applications. Talk a little bit about digital twins, a little bit what you're thinking about in terms of smart manufacturing, and what some of the sort of the more distant, more, I guess, horizon visions for these types of technologies are within the bioconvergence concept.
Absolutely. I would like to add that Michelangelo Canzoneri, of course, he is the expert to, for a deep dive, but I'm happy to share my thoughts as we have, discussed it in the specifics of the book. Ultimately, digital twins are nothing else than a virtual representation of a physical object. So that's, I think, the sort of easiest way to describe that. It all comes down to simulating, is when we talk about biomanufacturing, complex biological, chemical, and physical processes. So this is really an integral part and a transformative shift towards Industry 4.0, right? Because we are really striving for emphasizing the efficiency, increasing predictability, but also overall really optimizing our processes. So that's, I think, what we can boil it down to when it comes to digital twins. I think we need to keep in mind when it comes to what do we need to do to actually achieve these goals, to think about how does a roadmap look like, right? That we have really sort of a gradual implementation of the digital twins, where we can really start from basic models to more advanced system, so that we ultimately can really help facilitate the adoption.
Excellent. The next chapter obviously harkens back to your PhD work, and the title of this is the Mycoconvergence, and again, talking about all the things ultimately that I would say, even though fungi have an amazing history, looking back the last century, of giving us important therapeutics, whether they're antibiotics or immunosuppressants or antifungal drugs themselves, to doing a lot more. And you talk about in this chapter things like biofuel production, remediation, sort of the term mycoremediation, and the ability to extract pollutants that we don't really have great technologies for, but fungi have been evolving a lot longer on this planet and have figured out ways to do these things. Talk a little bit about this, and a little bit about your vision here. also coming back to some of what you're doing in your PhD, because the realm of natural products is one that I'm sorry that I keep coming back to this, but it is the mainstay of what created our modern industry. And a lot of the really smart people will tell us that, there's a lot of fungi out there that we've never looked at. And we really don't know what, in terms of the chemodiversity potential, is there. Say a couple words about that. I think it's important.
You're absolutely right, and I'm happy. I'm very happy we come back to the to the fungal topic. As I
Me
said
too.
before, for me, fungi are the unsung hero. I'm convinced that people are not aware of the diversity that fungi actually bring to our daily life. There are certain things that are highlighted in the news, but this is really far from. We're really just scratching the surface here. And before I talk about the microconvergence, maybe just a little story how this chapter ended up in this book. Because when I was thinking about how could the scope of this book actually look like, what makes sense in sort of, story flow, what does people interest? So we started with the introduction on sort of setting the stage, what is bioconvergence, some examples around this, of course, touching on ethics. Super important. This goes really hand in hand. You can't do anything with digitalization without, touching on the topic of ethics. We talk about topics like funding and collaboration, and Israel as an, ecosystem, as a blueprint for bioconvergence. And I wanted to really include a couple of technical chapters. So one of which is, of course, the digital twins in biomanufacturing. The other one is Convergence.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was selecting the authors to offer them to join this journey, I was thinking of Richard Hamelin, who is a professor at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, who I was actually supposed to join his lab many years ago. We had a conversation to join him as a postdoc at the time. Ultimately, I made the decision actually to transition to Yale after my stay in the UK. And I have to say, after all these years, we still stayed in touch because I find his work absolutely fascinating. And he's doing a really, really important job also for the environment and educating people. And I think we need to get out more on this voice on mycology related topics. So that's why I think it has this special place, not only in my heart, but actually also in this book here. And as you described, it touches on critical aspects. Why are fungi important, and what does microconvergence really mean, right? Not only the roles that fungi play in the environment, like decomposing organic matter, contributing to the nutrient cycling, and coming back also to my PhD and my studies at the time, symbiotic interactions, of course, which also comes down to natural product research, for example. I think there is a lot of potential, and as you also alluded to, we have a lot of unknown fungi out there that can still be explored. One of my projects at Yale, for example, focused in fact on volatile organic compounds for biofuel research. From fungi that we were newly isolating, and then understanding what are the structures, do they have potential as biofuels, and then of course moving to the other topic of fungal pathogens. And when we talk about microconvergence, in bringing essentially fungal biology, the genomics together with AI is essentially ultimately really paving the way into getting insights into what does it mean, what does it actually cause, the fungal resistance, how can we promote the development to manage the disease, right? So those AI tools and digitalization will really help us to define the strategies and really ultimately develop novel treatments. Yeah. So you can see this is a topic I'm really still very passionate about after all these years.
I think it's fascinating, and again, we've been covering the silent pandemic of antimicrobial resistance the last couple of years. I mean, we might have done 20 episodes now because I think it's an important theme. And again, when you look beyond, say, just the antibiotic and realize that nature, as you point out in your work, doesn't just kill stuff. It uses antivirulence factors, quorum sensing. I love to see, I love to have a future vision, 20 years down, how natural products ultimately did versus AI drug discovery, which is kind of really a hot theme nowadays. So we'll see who the winner is there. And obviously, as you're mentioning, it's probably a convergence of both that we're going to get the most important learnings out there. So no, that's a really exciting part of the book, and really focus on that. Coming back to your chapter at the beginning, chapter 1, which authored with Dr. Matz, and again, it's titled "Bridging Science and Nature to Shape Tomorrow." You get into the themes. Another thing I love, this biomimicry concept. You talk about the tensegrity of spider silk, which we did an episode on spider silk a couple of years ago, which is a fascinating biomaterial in its own right. These really interesting microscopic hairs on lizard feet that allow them to stick to the walls. I think you put it in some umbrella term known as bioinspiration, that we should, sort of the combinatorial nature of how these lower organisms do things, that we still have a lot to learn from. I would love to, say a couple words about biomimicry. I think this is another really important area of science that we probably don't hear as much about as we should. But still a lot, again, to learn, not just from sort of the single dimensional chemistry of nature, but how these organisms ultimately evolve to do these things that we sometimes have a hard time figuring out with our fancy machinery.
Absolutely, and I fully agree with you, because I think as I was pulling this book together, this chapter was Laura Matz, it was very easy to get carried away by all the information you find when you look for it. And then you're like, oh, yes, that's totally obvious. That's biomimicry. And I think we are just not sometimes connecting really the specific word for it. So ultimately, biomimicry falls under this umbrella term, let's say, on bioinspiration, which in itself is nothing else than to stimulate research in non-biological science and technology, right? And biomimicry itself refers then again to bio-inspired design, where we are essentially mimicking natural principles and then fully integrate them in the practical application. So you already mentioned a few examples. I'm also thinking about something that is probably quite well known is the topic of the bullet trains. If we think about that, when we think about the kingfisher and how did the shape of the bullet train come into being and make it really so fast and reduce the noise, which is absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
What does a life science supermind entail?
The life science supermind was actually maybe also here a few sentences on the background.
Sure.
Where this topic comes from, because this was essentially initiated through collaborations with our life science colleagues, where the team at the time has been working on convening this online community of experts to jointly discuss how could the future of life science actually look like. So this is sort of the nutshell or the essence of this topic. Yeah.
No, you have as you mentioned, you have a chapter dedicated to Israel, and again, when we profiled thought leaders on the show from Israel, whether it's been greening the deserts or some of the amazing biotech work that they have going on with quite limited resources. It's a wonderful example of a lot of bioconvergent activity, let's just say. Say a couple words about sort of what you learned in terms about Israel being an example, and then are there other territories around the world that we might not think of that are just like areas that are becoming hot in gene therapy or ag biotech, whatever the case may be, that are bioconvergence centers of excellence that we should keep an eye on over the next coming years?
Yeah, that's also a brilliant question, Ira. So I really want to highlight in here the Israeli ecosystem,
Sure.
because they are really the front runner when it comes to the topic of bioconvergence. They have quite a unique ecosystem that allows them to really, bring together and converge scientific discipline and, in fact, digitalization. They are at the forefront of this, what we call also in the book, the revolution. Mm-hmm. And they really have established this thriving ecosystem, which supports the multidisciplinary research that we mentioned at the beginning of this chat. So they do have a very strong culture of innovation. I think that's quite well known, but also entrepreneurship. So it's really a startup nation if you think about it. And what I find quite striking is the very close collaboration between academia, industry, but also the government. So the government has really made bioconvergence a priority, which ultimately in the next step means they are also putting the money behind it. They make the funding available that's really needed to drive this field. And these are all topics. Ultimately, everything that we discuss in the book on funding and collaboration, how do we break the silos? How do we learn? Sometimes it comes down to communication, right? So if you think about, you need to exchange between these different disciplines. So what's your language that you use? Right. You can communicate probably, but it might be slower. How do you get this efficiency that you really need to, break down the silos and work across different scientific disciplines? And I think that especially the Israeli ecosystem has role modeled that really well to be an example and a blueprint that hopefully we will be able to replicate internationally. I dare say that we are a leading example in the sense that we do have very different businesses under one, umbrella of the company with electronics, life science, and healthcare. And we are actually doing an excellent job in converging our capabilities across businesses while leveraging essentially digital transformation. So I think we can learn still a lot from our colleagues in Israel, but I think we are on, right at the forefront as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking about the forefront, and I don't know how much you got into this as you've been sort of synthesizing all of these different examples of bioconvergence, but one of the topics, and I don't speak too well about it just because I'm by no means an expert, but we've touched on sort of all things quantum on the show, from quantum computing to quantum biology. And obviously this is much more of a frontier concept. We don't have formal quantum computers yet, but as folks like to point out, we have beautiful examples of quantum computation in nature, whether it's photosynthesis or magnetoreception, olfaction in the human nose. Any interesting quantum themes that popped up as you were sort of been doing your research and assembling sort of these topics, and anything going on quantum wise? And obviously there's confidential stuff happening at the organization. Don't go into it, but love to get your feedback there if there's anything cool quantum oriented.
Actually, that is quite a hot topic as well. And yes, I have come across the concepts of quantum biology, and I think there are all sorts of topics that are being explored at the moment. I can point you in the direction of my colleague Philipp Habach at the Science and Technology Office in the team of Laura Matz, because he will be able to speak on that behalf. Yeah. And he will be able to share also some information and what we are interested in from Merck perspective.
Excellent. We'll do a follow up on that. We'll do an episode because sort of this quantum revolution as it pertains to drug discovery. It's again, it's going to be interesting to see where that all goes. I know we're in the early stages, but nonetheless, I thought I'd loop that in just because there is, as you were mentioning, a nice quantum biological connection behind it. So it's
yeah.
We're coming up against the the end of the year here. What should we be on the lookout for in terms of Dr. Nina Siragusa in 2025? Other public-facing initiatives that you can mention? Anything else on the calendar that we should know about as far as your team? Anything else you want to talk about, please?
Absolutely. So I have to say, we had recently had our book event where we essentially, promoted the book. That's how we essentially, I believe, found each other.
Yep.
And ultimately, at the moment, while people are reading this book, hopefully, I'm actually very much looking forward to discussion. I'm hoping sparking some discussion, some debate, stimulating some ideas. I can disclose that I already received some proposals for a sort of Bioconvergence 2.0,
Nice.
and that will be definitely is on my radar to, to dive into in the coming year. That I can say. So we should definitely reconvene in the not too distant future to follow up on that, because there has already been much excitement around the topic to dive into some tangible examples also more deeply.
Outstanding, outstanding. Yeah, we will definitely do a follow-up on this. And again, this is a topic that I personally love. I'm excited for you and your team and the organization for, putting this at the forefront of your strategic thinking. So I wish you the best with it, and look to follow up next year. Again, for everybody that's going to be listening to this episode across the various podcast networks, or who are going to be watching with us on the YouTube channel. Again, you've been spending time with Dr. Nina Siragusa, strategy, business, data and digital lead, Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany, doing really amazing things to usher in the bioconvergence, as they say, bridge science and nature to shape tomorrow. Great theme for our show as well. Nina, I want to thank you for taking the time out to introduce us to this concept, to walk us through a little bit of what you're doing. Obviously, thank you for what you do, and as we like to say on our show, similar to your theme, thank you for helping to create a better tomorrow by ushering in these new strategies. It's a really exciting discussion, and I look forward to doing a follow-up with you next year.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great having you.